Hi, I'm Ron Bienstock, and you're watching the Musician Network. I want to thank TMN, the Musician Network, for the opportunity to discuss a few interesting items, important items involving the Lacey Act. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that. I'm joined by the world-renowned guitar expert, George Gruhn, and I'm honored to be here with George. George is one of the experts on the Lacey Act. I'm Ron Bienstock. I'm an attorney within the music instrument business, and I do a lot of work involving the Lacey Act. And it's our opportunity to explain to you a little bit about, A, what the Lacey Act is. I'll give you a quick historical introduction. The Lacey Act was brought about during the McKinley administration. No, I was not around then, in the early part of the 20th century. And it effectively was to protect endangered species. And later it was amended to include wood and timber. And the overview I can give you is that the Lacey Act truly is intended to protect endangered wildlife, which is everything we would all support. However, there has been some unintended consequences by the Lacey Act, and I'm going to let George explain some of the unintended consequences.
The Lacey Act was amended in 2008 to include virtually every plant or animal species that would be imported. So this means that to bring in raw materials to make guitars, you have to have the English and the Latin scientific name of each and every species, the country of origin of each, certification that it was harvested legally according to the laws of the country of origin and the laws of the USA. In many cases, this is extremely difficult to do. Some of these species are found in various countries over a broad range. And if you buy wood at a lumber yard, they don't necessarily tell you where it came from exactly. They may say it's mahogany or ebony, but even in Madagascar, for example, in that one island alone, there's 105 known species of ebony that botanists have identified. Plus, they did not grandfather in vintage instruments or used instruments. And I can't retroactively change the content of guitars made 50 years or 100 years ago. In many cases, I really can't identify the exact species of mahogany or ebony. I know it's ebony and I know it's mahogany. I may be able to tell it's Brazilian rosewood versus Indian rosewood, but it's certainly easier on new ones. But even with the new ones, it gets down to it's exceedingly difficult, even to the point, for example, where Gibson has gotten into trouble because the ebony and rosewood, Indian rosewood and Indian ebony fingerboard and bridge blanks that they brought in were cut over 6 millimeters in thickness, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service found that there's an obscure Indian law that the Indians never enforced, but it says that if it's over 6 millimeters in thickness, it must be finished goods only, which means that fingerboard and bridge blanks are illegal. And if Gibsons are illegal, then so is everybody else's. In addition, there's a treaty, the CITES Treaty, C-I-T-E-S, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. It's an international treaty. Any violation of CITES is automatically a violation of Lacey, and if it's an item over $350 in value, it's a felony. So this is a major problem for the musical instrument industry, which needs to get some administrative and possibly legislative fixes.
I've been working with Congressman Cooper from Tennessee, who deserves real credit for leading the charge on an amendment to the Lacey Act to prevent the enforcement of what everybody's decided is the unfair aspects. One would be the idea of enforcing the bringing in of a single instrument or multiple instruments by a touring band or touring musicians who may be stopped at customs for the fact that they brought in some woods or some aspect, maybe an abalone inlay on a guitar, and they cannot identify its source. It begins the problematic nature of what Lacey Act was intended to do, but the unintended consequences, which become very negative. It also prevents certain vintage dealers, of course George being the premier vintage dealer, from importing and exporting certain instruments. So the relief And amendment to this act is important. And what we'd like you to know is that you should learn more about this at various websites. But before we kind of wrap up, to tell you that the Lacey Act is often misunderstood, I think, by the average person, thinking that the music instrument business is looking to have and create further exploitation of endangered species, and that's just not true. That I believe, it's a personal subjective viewpoint, that the instrument business wants to protect endangered species, works very diligently to protect endangered species, but we do make products out of wood, and that's why they sound good. There are other alternative sources, but they'll be slower in coming. As technology increases, they will be more available. George, you want to tell everybody where they can find more about this?
NAMM, National Association of Music Merchants, has a website, www.namm.org. If you go to their governmental affairs section, it will give detailed information. After you have studied this, we then would urge those interested to write, call, or email their people in Congress, House of Representatives and Senate, to urge them to study and we hope support Jim Cooper's bill, H.R. 3210, which will provide some relief that we think we really need. We are not advocating anything that will endanger living species or environments, but we want to preserve our integrity and ability to operate legally in an honorable profession, making and distributing musical instruments, playing and touring with musical instruments should not be criminalized. On the other hand, we do need to conform to reasonable regulation. We are not asking for a total lack of regulation. We are asking to study this, to make it possible to conform in real-world terms.
Well said. Thank you again to the Musician Network for the opportunity to explain a little bit about the Lacey Act, and we urge you to take a look at those websites. I want to again thank George for his great expertise in all this, and we appreciate you watching.